Thanks very much. Lovely jubbly. Morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Some of you I know, so I can see Ben. Hello, Ben, in the corner. Hello. Some of you will have seen me speak before, and if you have, some of this might be a slight revisit if you like, but those of you that haven't, the main things I want to get across about me and my intention for our session today is I work both as a coach and as a therapist. So I work for a company called Barefoot Coaching, and we have other representation here at the speakers. Kim Morgan spoke on Monday, I think, so some of you might have seen that. She's our CEO. But I have a background in cognitive behavioural therapy, which certainly in the UK, which is where I am, I'm in Nottinghamshire, you might have picked that up from my voice to be fair, but yeah, I'm from Nottinghamshire, and we use it a lot for depression and for a wide range of anxiety issues. Today, I'm here as a coach, really, bringing some of my therapeutic knowledge to bear. So I'm going to talk you through, my intention is to talk you through 3 things that can really help in terms of managing stress and anxiety, which you hopefully could be able to apply straight away for yourself, if that's applicable, and hopefully that you'll be able to share with other people, if that's something that you feel is appropriate in the work that you do. The kind of aim for me is not necessarily to talk about sort of severe mental health issues at this point, but to talk about the anxiety that we all experience. And as far as I'm concerned, they're all part of a spectrum. When somebody experiences a really severe anxiety issue, it tends to be for good reasons. It's not because something's gone weird in their head. It's actually they've got good reason to feel anxious, actually. They might not feel that way, but usually that's the case. So we're going to go through 3 practical things. We're going to talk about what anxiety is, first of all. 3 practical things. I want to leave some space for questions or comments as we go along, but we might have to strike a balance there somewhere between it. So I would like you to know that I am going to hang about as well for a bit at the end of today's session. So we're due to finish at 10:02, and I know you've got a break there. I'm going to leave some space. Probably I'm going to aim for about 22, 1:45 to stop, leave some space for some Q&A, but I'll hang about beyond that if you have any other questions as we go along. So should we do some stuff? Should we talk about some stuff? Yes, let's do some stuff. All right then. Okay, so let me share my screen. All right. Here we are. So the first thing I want to do before we actually start talking about this is just a little bit of contracting, just a little bit of stuff to say, you've already been made aware that we're recording today. I just want to reiterate, if you have a question or a comment and you know that it's about you, or you know that it's about a client that you have, just to manage your confidentiality there. So it's your choice what you choose to ask about or what you choose to say. Even if I ask you something, I ask a question of the group, you don't have to answer. That's fine. You choose what you want to say and what you don't want to say. And if somebody does choose to ask a question or reveal something, that we just respect that. I'm going to take an assumption that everybody's okay with that. But if you could just do me a little bit of a thumbs up, if you're all right with that, that'd be really helpful. Thanks very much, everybody. All right then. So let's start with what is anxiety and what do you mean by stress and what's the difference? Sometimes that's a question for coaches about kind of what's okay for me to work with, if you like. So, what's the difference between somebody feeling a bit stressed out and somebody dealing with an anxiety issue? And I might touch on that as we go along. Let's start with anxiety. What is anxiety? How do we understand it? So anxiety, from a therapeutic from a clinical perspective, is a word that we use as an umbrella term to cover a wide range of things that people might experience from a little bit of worry, that kind of like nagging little worry that you might have in the back of your mind about, did I send that email, or did I lock my front door, whatever it might be, through to full-blown panic attack, where it feels like I can't breathe, that kind of thing. They are all part of your anxiety response, but they can feel very different, if you like. So your anxiety response is, the other word you might use there is fear. A fear response. A little bit of worry is a little bit of fear. Full-blown panic is a lot of fear. It's your threat response. It's there to keep you alive. Your anxiety response happens when your brain has clocked danger. There's some danger here for me. And what it does is it gets your body ready to run away or to fight the threat or the danger. So Your heart starts beating faster, might start pounding. Your breathing gets a little bit more shallow and a little bit faster, sometimes a lot faster, that kind of thing. What your body is trying to do is pump oxygen, so get oxygen into the body through the sort of hyperventilation and pump it to your muscles. If there is a tiger in the room and you need to run away or to fight, you need lots of oxygen in your muscles so that they can work really well, so you can run as fast as you can. You don't really need to be able to do maths or any sort of philosophy. So generally speaking, when we get stressed and when we get anxious, our thinking closes down. That is your brain basically looking at the danger, the tiger, and the exit. That's all it needs to be able to see. It doesn't need to be able to do anything clever. What I think this means, or what I'd like you to be able to take away from today is, if you feel anxious, or if anybody you know feels anxious, that isn't weird. That isn't abnormal. That is a natural and necessary response that your body has. If you don't have that response ever, you're going to be in trouble. You need it. Things that typically trigger anxiety are anything that represents danger. We'll speak about that a little bit more in a moment. But typically speaking, where you might see this a lot, certainly in the workplace or in sort of everyday environments, is two things. Feeling cornered. What I mean by this is feeling like you've got no option. So classic, something that will make somebody feel like they are burning out because they're just constantly feeling on edge, is when they have too much to do. So they can't physically do all the work they've got to do, but it is unacceptable to them to leave the work unfinished. That makes us feel cornered. That's lose-lose. I can't do all the work, but I also can't leave it unfinished. That is horrible. As a metaphor there, we just don't like being trapped. If you found yourself if you woke up in a room and there were no doors and no windows, you would immediately start panicking. That is a threat. You try and take a cat to the vet and you try and put it in a box. Cat doesn't like it. Simple as that. We don't like feeling cornered, and it will trigger that anxiety response if we feel we are stuck and there's no way out. And that is why this sort of third thing I put on here, when somebody's got too much to carry, they've got too much to deal with, that is something that will make them feel anxious. That isn't them being weak or not managing it well enough. It's just natural. We will feel that way. I haven't spoken about the term stress yet, so I'd like to just spend a moment on that. It's related to anxiety. The way that it makes most sense in my head is it's a very similar physical response, right? So you might feel that kind of tension in your chest. You might notice yourself getting sort of hot and sweaty. That's a big part of the anxiety response. We tend to use the word stress. So stress literally, like in a mechanics or engineers will use stress as kind of the amount something can take, the amount of pressure something can take, right? So stress is about feeling that anxiety over a reasonable period of time. So if you wake up in the morning and you open up your emails and you've got 150 emails and you weren't expecting them and something's kicked off and it's all, oh no, what's going on here? You might immediately start feeling that stress response, that anxiety response, and then it carries on for like an hour or so. And eventually you feel all sort of tense in your shoulders, you've got headache. Essentially what that is your body holding itself ready to run away or to fight for ages. And it just takes a toll on your body. If you've got a little bit of worry or anxiety or stress all day, that is like your body having its foot on the accelerator just a little bit all day, and it drains you. It uses up your fuel quicker than you would if you weren't feeling stressed. All right then. Let's just talk a little bit more about, well, how come we get anxious? Why? Okay, Ted, I'm hearing that it's normal, fine, but it doesn't feel normal. The stuff I feel like I'm worrying about doesn't make any sense to me. It's tiny. That's kind of the main thing that comes along when people talk about anxiety. Everybody that I see comes in saying, I don't know why I feel this way. It's ridiculous. Something like that. I want to talk a little bit about why one person might get really anxious in a certain situation and the person next to them isn't scared at all. Or indeed, why you can feel really confident in some situations and really anxious in others. So the difference, we like to think that we see the world as it is. That you look at the world and you just see it for what it is. And unfortunately, it's absolute nonsense. It's just not true. Your brain's job is not to see the world clearly and to see the world rationally and reasonably. Your brain's job is to keep you alive. And the way your brain tries to do that is to spot danger. It's actively seeking danger so that it can react quickly when it comes along. If you were looking at a scene, you were in a room and you saw some lovely chairs and you saw some books in the corner and you saw some people having some coffee and you saw a tiger and you saw some carpet and you saw some tables, one of those things needs to stand out quickly. And as you enter that room, your brain is already, it's like a little radar, like boop, 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 just looking for things that might be dangerous. Actively looking for it. Problem is, how do we tell what's dangerous? And we learn what's dangerous by experience. Brains that function really well will want to avoid situations that have caused them danger or distress before. So, on a very basic level, you are more likely to be scared of dogs if you've been bitten by a dog. If you've never been bitten by a dog, you're probably going to be okay. It's probably going to be all right. The way we feel anxious or what we feel anxious about is driven by our experiences. However, we don't only get scared about things that can actually cause us danger, like a dog or an animal. We often get anxious about things that probably can't cause us any danger, like, am I going to get my work finished? I'm not going to die, right? Nobody's going to come in and end me if I don't get it wrong, but it makes me feel so stressed. Or public speaking. It's a really common thing that people get anxious about, public speaking. Nothing's going to happen, realistically. But we get really anxious about it. And I want to just talk a little bit about that, because that's one of the things that we really see a lot of anxiety about. The way that makes sense to me is we don't only survive by spotting actual danger to our lives. We survive and we do well when we are in a group. We're mammals, right? Chimpanzees, basically. And mammals survive in a group. So if you are not in the group, that is dangerous. If you've ever seen any Attenborough and you see, the chimpanzee that sort of fails to win the challenge with the other chimpanzee, they're on their own. They're on their own and they're in danger. It's not good. We have an innate need to be safe in a group. But again, what represents safety in a group is going to be completely different for you than it is the person next to you. So the example I always use is me and my wife, right? So I learned early on that my role in a group is to keep everybody happy. And the way in which I've kind of made sense of that is, when I was a little boy, I was a good little boy. And I looked after my sister. And everybody went, aren't you a nice boy? Aren't you a good boy for looking after your sister? And that tells me I'm okay in this group. My role is safe in this group if I make everybody happy, if I'm nice. For some people, it will be different. So other chimpanzees, it's as long as I'm strong. As long as I'm the strongest, I'm okay. So they don't need to be nice. It doesn't worry them if people don't like them. It worries them if they're not being the strongest. My wife, her family, they're very nice people, but it's just not the same messages that came on. For her, it was really valued for things to be done right. And if you look after things, so the things that typically stress her out is when things aren't lined up or things aren't squared away, things aren't finished. That's going to make her feel more stressed. Doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me. And what happens there is we just don't understand each other sometimes. She's getting worried about one thing. I'm thinking, what are you getting worried about that for? I'm getting worried about another thing. She's saying, what are you doing? I don't understand. And this is something that's really useful to get your head around, which is whatever you get anxious about, whatever stresses you out, even if it seems daft or it doesn't match what other people get stressed out about, you've probably got good reason. You've learned it somewhere that this is either something to be scared, something that is dangerous, or something that's going to keep you safe. And that's different for all of us. So just to sort of summarize what people might get anxious about, what you might see, the key ones that we really always notice and that are completely universal, I think, is We all worry about illness, death, and dying sometimes. If you find something concerning on your body, it's perfectly reasonable, it's natural for your body to jump ahead and go, what if that's something really bad? Financial difficulties are typically quite universal as well. For me, that represents resources. So animals will worry if they haven't got any food. We worry about our finances because that means food and it means shelter. You're going to lose your job. The first place you go to is, what about the house? What about the food? How are we going to take care of my family? That's perfectly normal. But then there's things that that seem really individual. So letting people down, do I worry about that? Does that stress me out, or do I not care? Getting things wrong. Some people will not be able to tolerate any mistakes whatsoever, and some people will give themselves a little bit more leeway. Dropping the ball, or not finishing everything you've started, or public speaking. Putting yourself in front of a group of people might feel scarier to you if you have been embarrassed before, if you have been laughed at. If it's always gone well, you'll probably be able to do it, and it won't be a problem. Uncertainty, let's talk a little bit about this, because this is definitely the case at the moment. So there'll be a lot of people concerned about their jobs, concerned about where things are going to go. Are the schools going to remain open? All that kind of stuff. We hate uncertainty. We're not good at it. Sometimes we're better than others, though. The reason we don't like uncertainty is what your brain wants when it's spotted some danger is it wants an answer. It wants an answer. So if you've ever been worried that have you ever had a thought in your mind of, did I send that email to the right person? If you're sending somebody an email about somebody else and you worry suddenly that you've sent it to them, when that thought pops into your head, all you want to do is go and check. Is that right? All you want to do is I'll go in my sent folder and I'll just see. So that's your brain going, what if this has happened? And it can't settle until it knows whether that's happened. Imagine if you went into your sent folder and you just couldn't see anything in your sent folder. Imagine what that would do with your mind, right? All you want is an answer. It's all you want. And a lot of the time we can get an answer. So that example I've just given you, we can get an answer for a lot of things. You can check your sent folder and that's fine. But a lot of things you can't get an answer to, like, are my family going to be okay? Is COVID going to work itself out? Am I still going to have a job at the end of this? You can't get an easy answer to that. You can try, and the things you might do is you might go online, just read the news. I was doing that at the beginning of the COVID thing. I was reading the news every 5 minutes. And what my brain's doing there is it's looking for an answer. I want to know 100% whether this is going to be okay. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. And then the fact that I'm checking stresses me out too. Because I'm not doing anything good for myself while I'm checking. I'm ignoring my kids. I'm not paying attention to what's around me. I'm too busy going over and over and over it. That's one explanation of what worrying is. So worrying is one theory, or one explanation is it's your brain spotting possible danger and then just going over and over and over it because it's looking for an answer. But unfortunately, it doesn't find one, and instead it finds more problems. Round and round and round we go. We've spoken a bit about this threat response so far, but I want to talk you through just a couple more symptoms, because I think these get misinterpreted sometimes as, again, weird, but they're not. They're totally normal. So the normal things that people will experience are tightness in the chest. You might notice yourself flushing in the cheeks. You get sweaty in the pits. You might get dizzy. That's quite common. Again, your blood's rushing, so you get dizzy. The one that really freaks people out when it happens is sickness. You'll feel sort of churning stomach, that kind of thing. Needing the loo. But the one that freaks people out is when you feel spaced out. So when you get really anxious, you can feel a bit detached from the world, or like things aren't real. That is actually part of a normal anxiety response. But often what that does when people experience that is it makes them feel they're going crazy. And that makes them scared again, which makes them even more anxious, which makes them even more spaced out. So I want you to know that if you ever hear that from somebody, that's often a usual sign of anxiety. Things that we do to try and deal with anxiety is, so if we're faced with uncertainty, we do one of two things. We either want to know 100%, is it okay? So that thing about checking your sent box, has it gone? I might do some research. So again, about COVID, I might go on the news to see if I can do some research to find an answer. I might ask for reassurance. I might say to my wife, do you think this is going to work out? Do you think we're going to be okay? How does she know? She hasn't got any lenses to the future, but we do it anyway, right? Overworking is one example of okay, you imagine you've got too much work to do and that makes you feel very stressed. One way you might try and deal with that is to try and get the work finished anyway, even though it's not possible. And you might sit at your desk till 7 in the evening, even though that's still doesn't take away your anxiety because there's still stuff that's left. When we're faced with something that we can't get an answer to, no matter how hard we try, like, is COVID going to be okay? We'll distract ourselves instead. So these are things that people do when they're feeling stressed. You will find yourself watching more telly, constantly scrolling through social media. That's a big one for me. I'll find myself on my phone, just going blank. Does that make sense? Just going blank. Booze, unfortunately, it works really well in the short term. Makes us feel a bit numb. But generally, we don't want to have to rely on that. Food tends to do it as well. If you're feeling a bit anxious, stuffing something down my throat, actually, while I'm eating it, I'm not feeling anything. But with all of these things, it only lasts so long as you are doing it. Some of the other things that people do that are more self-destructive are, for example, online gambling. So online gambling really takes your mind off everything. But generally speaking, when you come off the gambling app that you've been on, you don't feel much better. You don't feel much better. And then you've got to go back in again because you feel bad again. So what we're going to talk about now, what we are, yeah, we can do this in 15 minutes. Of course we can. Right. So is 3 things that we can do to actually help when you are feeling anxious or stressed. I wonder whether this is a reasonable point for us to pause and just check in with whether there's any major sort of comments or questions that are coming up now, and we can decide whether we deal with them now or whether we wait to the end. What do you reckon, folks? What we got?
Hi, Ted. There's one question. Hi, Ted. There's one question about, we just recently got. It's from Theen. Perhaps we need to find a good solution for the management team who feels uncertainty in Agile. When will you deliver? How can we help them through this uncertainty?
That's useful. Okay, so if I'm hearing it right, so if there's a management team, when are we going to do this stuff? How is it going to go? How can we help them with that uncertainty? One of the things that I'll do with individuals or with teams is usually what we reach for when we're trying to help somebody when they're dealing with uncertainty is we try and find an answer for them. So you might say, well, how could you find some certainty here? Could you ask such and such when it's going to happen? Can you reach out? And those are all really good places to start. But often there's still a gap. There's still a gap. There's still doubts. There is still this hole somewhere where it could just all fall apart. And how do I deal with that? Especially if I've got to wait for something. So at the moment, there'll be a lot of people waiting for a lot of different things. There'll be people waiting for the results of COVID tests. There'll be people waiting for other hospital results. I was talking to somebody the other day who said they've got a scan, but they've got to wait for 2 weeks. What I want to reach for is saying, how could you bring that forward? How could you make that quicker? That would make it all go away, right? But in reality, what if they can't? What if what I'm working on them with is, how do you deal with waiting? And we're going to talk about this in the third thing we talk about today, but a helpful thing to do is ask them, when they're feeling really anxious, when they're feeling that uncertainty, what do they do? What do they do? And odds are they probably do some of this stuff that we've got up on the screen now, right? So I'm worried that it's not all going to go ahead. So I'm spending all my time rereading emails, going over things. I'm constantly sat at my desk, but I don't really have that much to do. So I'm sort of just, reading things and going over stuff. I'm not giving myself a break. I'm not going out for a run because that would be cheating. Yeah, if I go out for a run, then I'm not working and, well, that's not okay. And then to ask, what are you not doing? Usually what we do when we're feeling anxious and when we're feeling uncertain is we stop doing the things that actually help us. If I could give you an example, when I'm feeling anxious, the things that typically set me off are letting people down. I will reach for my phone. I will reach for, again, trying to overwork. And it's actually really physically hard for me to just close my laptop at 5 o'clock or 5:30 and just go and sit with my kids. Because all my brain is telling me is reach for your phone. If you reach for your phone and you just bury yourself in stuff, you won't feel anything. And that would be great. Sitting with your kids, I'm still feeling all this anxiety. It's still there. I can really feel it. But when I ask myself, how do I want to have spent my evenings? I don't want to have just spent it distracting myself. I want to have spent some time with my kids. I want to have done some stuff. Again, when you apply that to the workplace, do they want to spend the next 6 months not taking any breaks, just sitting there researching things? Or do they want to do things that are really helpful for themselves? So focus on action. That's what I would say, because it's hard. You can't take away that uncertainty for them. And that's what they're trying to do already. They're trying to rid themselves of the uncertainty to eradicate the doubt. But it's not possible. I hope that answers the question, but let me know if not by the end. Thank you very much for that. So folks, let's talk about the things you can do. It's a bit of a vicious cycle, all of this. The more stressed you feel, the more you're going to reach for things that take away that stress in the short term, but that don't really help you. The more you'll reach for booze, the more you'll reach for reassurance, and you'll stop doing the things that are good for you, which means you're even more vulnerable to feeling more stressed. The more tired you are, the less opportunity you've had for positive experiences in your life, the more you are vulnerable to feeling more anxiety, more stress. The world starts to look more negative. So it keeps itself going. And these are some ways that you can break that. First off, I'm going to ask you to have a little go at this after today. The first thing we'll do in CBT is we'll really try and understand what's driving the anxiety. What am I actually anxious about? It seems like a really basic question, but often we don't really know. Sometimes you'll ask somebody, like, what are you feeling stressed about here? They say, I don't know, it's just stressful. First port of call in terms of managing your anxiety and your stress is understanding what's stressing you out in the first place. And this is how we do that. So we'll break it down. We'll get somebody to sit with a piece of paper. Right, it's Monday morning and I'm feeling really stressed. Okay, right, let's break this down. What's the situation? I'm at home. I've just opened up my emails. And how are you feeling? I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling anxious. Right, okay. My next question is, I'm just going to skip ahead a slide and come back. What emotion are you feeling? And what is it about this situation that's making you feel that way? So I'm sat at my desk, I'm looking at my emails and I'm feeling stressed. What is it about looking at my emails that's making me feel so stressed? And then we're going to go from there. That starts to give me my thoughts, what's going on in my head. In fact, you know what, folks, this wasn't part of the plan, but I'm going to draw some stuff, if that's okay. I'll do an example for you. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. Hello. I'm going to get my flip chart. Hold on. All right, let's do this. So, it's a brand new flip chart, even better. Come on. Right, and I've just moved house, so I don't know where all my fancy pens are. All right, well, I've got one. So that'll do. So, hoping you can see this, but if not, pin my screen for a minute so that you can see what I'm doing. And I'll point this at here. So we'll start with, what's the situation? At home, looking at my emails. How am I feeling? I'm feeling stressed. That's how I'm feeling. Right, so now what I want to know, what is it about looking at my emails that's making me feel so stressed? Well, I've just seen an email from Brian. Something's gone wrong. Okay. I start to get a bit of a sense of why I'm feeling stressed, but that's not enough. So I'm going to ask it again. What is it about the idea that something's gone wrong that's making me feel so stressed? Well, I've messed up. What is it about the idea that I've messed up that makes me feel so stressed? Brian will be angry. What is it about the idea that Brian's going to be angry with me that makes me feel so stressed? He won't like me. And you only stop when you don't really have an answer anymore. So I'll keep asking it until I don't really have an answer anymore. So what is it about the idea that Brian won't like you that makes you feel so stressed? It's just that. It's just that he won't like me and that he'll be annoyed with me. That's the thing that's making me feel really stressed. Okay, great. So it's not that you've messed up per se. It's not that something's gone wrong per se. It's where your brain's gone, where your mind's gone to the consequences of what's going to happen here. Brian's annoyed with me, and it's that really bothers me. And what you'll notice if you do this quite a lot, what you'll notice is you start to pick up themes. So like 80% of the things that I get anxious about or stressed about are about letting people down. And I pretty much only know that through having done this a lot. And you'll start to notice, and you start to get to know yourself a little bit better. And what you'll then be able to do is spot it. What it takes away, if you're working with people who feel anxious or feel stressed, doing this with somebody and helping them get to understand themselves a bit better, what it can really do is it can help them feel a bit less weird. Because if you don't know why you're feeling anxious and it feels like it just comes out of nowhere, that can make you feel a little bit daft. Like it's just happening and it's not in my control. But if you understand yourself a bit better, sometimes that can really help. The next couple of things we do, so the next couple of things on my slides, I'll tell you what I can do if it's useful. Mark, what's the best way of me sharing my slides with you guys? I could email it to you and put it out somewhere, or shall I put it in the chat? What's the best thing to do?
Email them me and we'll attach them to your session.
Superb. All right, I'll do that. Thanks, Mark. So you'll have this little list of stuff that I've said. The next thing we do is we try and understand what's happening physically. So, all right, so I'm sat there, I'm worried about Brian not liking me, I'm feeling really stressed. Physically, what's going on? Well, I'm feeling a bit sick, I'm feeling a bit hot. Grand, all right. And then next up, finally, this is at the bottom, isn't it? You can't see this. I'm going to point it downwards for a moment. This is where I check my floor to make sure that I haven't just put anything out of shot. All right, here we are. So, behavior. This is the last thing we do. What do I find myself doing? So I'm sat on my emails. Oh, hello. Come on, Ted. You need to show all this. Right, so what do I find myself doing? I'm sat on my emails. I'm worried about Brian not liking me. What do I do? So I might apologise 50 times. Yeah, once isn't enough because I'm still. I'll apologise once. It's still not taking away my anxiety. I do it again and again and again and again. I reread things. I sort of run around and swear. Blah, 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 blah. I put all my work to the side, all that kind of stuff. And again, if you get in the habit of trying to analyse yourself like this, trying to just keep a little log like this when you get anxious or when you get stressed, the other thing you'll notice patterns here. And you'll be able to ask yourself, is this good? Is this helping me, the things that I'm doing? You'll notice the things you reach for first, and you'll be able to check that out. So that's first thing, is understand what it is that you're feeling anxious about and how it is that you're reacting to that. I'm conscious that I knew I would do this. I said maybe 22 for Q&A, but I reckon it's going to be 1:45 because we've got 2 more things to deal with. But I now want to give you something that will help you. What do you do once you've recognised your thinking? I've recognised that I'm feeling this way. That doesn't stop it. One question to ask yourself, which is in the slide, it's the next slide, is what would I say to somebody else who was thinking this? So if my best mate came to me with this, or if one of my kids came to me and they said, I'm really worried that I've been doing this piece of work and somebody's emailed me saying it's gone wrong and I'm really worried that they're going to hate me and that I've really let everybody down. What would I say to them? And I'd probably say, everybody makes mistakes. You'll be able to make up for it. If they're angry with you now, maybe that's okay. Maybe they need to be angry for a bit. That kind of thing. Whereas when it's me, that's not how I talk to myself. I'll be saying to myself, you idiot. How could you have let that happen? What a moron you must be. That kind of thing. So asking yourself, and you can really apply this to other people, what would you say to somebody else, your best friend, somebody you really care about? What would you say to them? And how would you say it? What tone of voice would you use? It can really help somebody get a different perspective. All right, so that's the thinking. So job number 1 is recognizing what you're even worried about. And then what would I say to somebody else if they were thinking this?
Ted, we have a question here.
Please.
How team as an organization does feel or experience anxiety, or it doesn't?
Say that again, sorry.
Yeah, how team as an organization does feel or experience anxiety, or doesn't? Question mark. That's it. So
how does a team or an organization experience anxiety, or doesn't?
yes.
Okay, all right. How does a kind of group experience that?
Yeah,
that's really interesting. What an interesting question. Things kind of can transfer, if you like. Things can transfer from one person to another. So if one person is feeling anxious, it can sort of hop everybody else up as well. I don't know if you've ever experienced that yourself, that it kind of, again, we react that way. We are a group. We are animals that live as part of a group, and actually picking up on what other people are feeling can really do that. But you'll have also experienced people in a team having different reactions. So one person getting really anxious and then another person being really exasperated and being like, what are you getting anxious about? This is fine. Can you just calm down? So you can get both responses. It is possible for a whole team to get that. And actually, the thing we're going to do next can be quite helpful if you're noticing that in a whole team, because you don't have to dig into exactly what it is that we're worried about here. You don't have to get people to open up. You can just give them something that will help them calm down. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about, which might be really useful in a group situation, actually. So yes, actually, for those of you that work with teams, if you can sense a lot of tension in the room or a lot of anxiety in the room, these next couple of things could really be useful for that. So I'm glad somebody's asked that question, actually. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Right.
Ted.
Cheers. Let's find where I was. Here we go. So I knew I'd got off track. Physical. This is the next thing we're going to do. How can you manage physically what happens? We've spoken about this big old stuff that goes in your body. Your heart rate's increasing, you're breathing faster, you're sweating. How do you manage that? How do you deal with that? And why would you bother? So for me, this is the first place to start. If you're feeling anxious, this is the first place to start because it's the quickest way of managing it. Quickest way of managing it, easiest way of managing it, which is just to slow down your body. So there's a couple of things I'm going to ask you to do. Those of you that have got your cameras on, I'm afraid you've made a mistake because I'm going to be able to see whether or not you're doing it, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do is this. I'll actually point it at me for a sec. Right, just for a sec. I want you to hold yourself already tense, like curled up in a ball like a hedgehog, right? Tense as you possibly can, looking down at the floor. And I want you to say to yourself, oh, I feel so relaxed. All right. And then what I'm going to get you to do is I want you to just sort of spread out a bit, just lean back, legs out, big breath, look at the ceiling. Oh, I feel so stressed out. All right. You will notice, potentially, that those two things don't match, right? When you feel anxious, this is what your body wants to do. And that means that there is an association built between sitting this way and feeling anxious. And there is an association between opening up, making your body go a bit floppy, having your chin up, that is your body associates with feeling relaxed. Your body can only really do this when there's no threats around. And you can consciously choose to do that. So if you're feeling stressed, you're feeling tense, one of the first things you can do is just adjust your posture. So shoulders back and down, chin up, pretty relaxed, so loosey-goosey. Yeah, we're not holding ourselves sort of rigid, we're just kind of reasonably relaxed. And it is harder for your body to keep pushing you, to keep ramping up the energy. It's harder for it to do that while you're like that. That can work really well when it comes to public speaking, but it can also work really well when you just sat at your desk. Get up for a moment, make your arms go floppy, get your chin up, get your shoulders back, and it will help you just unclench, is a good way of putting it. Yeah, just help you unclench, unwind. Next thing we're going to do is breathing. So some of you might have come across breathing techniques before, if you've ever done yoga or anything like that. It's a really simple way of really slowing your body down, and it doesn't take long. So what I'm going to ask you to do, put one hand on your chest, one hand on your gut, on your belly, all right? The only reason I'm going to ask you to do this is that when you get anxious, your breathing is in your chest, like when you're sprinting. So like that. You only use the top bit of your lungs. When you're relaxed, when you're sleeping, you use the whole of your lungs. It goes, and it really inflates. And that will push your belly out a little bit. So you're kind of feeling for, am I really getting my belly to move here? Okay. So I want you to just take a really long, slow breath. You're not snatching at it. You're not doing any of that. You just. Now you're all on mute. So I'd encourage you to try making a little bit of a noise as you do the out breath. So we're going to carry on. Okay, so you may notice we didn't do that for very long. We did maybe like 4 or 5 breaths, something like that, maybe 6. But it starts to slow things down straight away. And really all you're doing there is you're helping your body take its foot off the pedal. Does that make sense? Help your body take its foot off the pedal. And you can really see how you could immediately do that in a group. You could just all sit together, do a bit of breathing, get them to do a bit of posture stuff. Let's all unwind, because we will do better thinking if we're starting from a point where we're slowed down a little bit. A third thing with physical stuff. So we've covered posture and covered breathing. The final thing is you can't always stop for 30 seconds and do breathing, right? So if you're in the middle of a meeting, you might not want to do that. Or if you're in the middle of a speech, you might not want to do that. So how do you slow things down if you're already in public, if you like? And my suggestion there is you can slow down the pace of your speech and the pace of your movement. All your body wants to do when it's anxious is to go really fast. So you'll notice that, like if you see somebody stressed at work and they're like hammering on their keys like this, and they're sort of snatching at their cup of tea and all of that. If you just purposefully try and move slowly and speak slowly, again, all you're really doing is just helping your body take its foot off the pedal. Let's just slow this down. And it will help everything unwind, and it will help you think a bit more clearly. So the physical stuff is really, really useful. And again, you don't even have to understand why you're anxious to be able to do that. It's a really lovely thing to be able to introduce somebody to. Okay. Oh my word, I've gone well over. Come on, Ted. Right, I'm going to do this in like 30 seconds. You ready? So last thing, because I can't not do it, is helping you. If you notice that you're somebody that's reaching for distraction a lot of the time, some of the things we've spoken about, you're either checking things a lot or you're reaching for distraction. The key thing I'd ask you to ask yourself is, how do you tell what's distraction and what's just things that I like to do that happen to be distracting? So for example, I like television and I like some video games sometimes. When is that distraction and when is it just good? And the answer is quite simple. Are you enjoying it? If you can genuinely come away from what you've been doing, having enjoyed it, having had a good time, then that's good for you. If all it really was a distraction, you will know. You'll be able to tell. And what I'd encourage you to think about is, you're doing that distraction for good reason. It works. It makes you go blank. It's actually physically harder sometimes to do the things that are good for you, like going for a walk or listening to some music rather than engaging in a game. Pick 2 or 3 things that you know are really good for you, like listening to music, going for a walk, reading a book, playing with your kids, having a conversation with your partner, and do your best to practice it. Even though I'm stressed and my body just wants me to go and curl up in a corner, I'm going to practice doing something good for myself today. That's it. All right, come on, Ted. Right, let's have some Q&A for 30 seconds. I'm sorry, I always do this. So
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing.
Jade, we have a question. What to do
Yeah.
if someone feels only lost and only says, I don't know? I
Right.
repeat my question. What to do if someone feels only lost and only says, I don't know? And
Thank you. Yeah.
there's one more question, which is about define therapy and its boundaries.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I can do those two things. So let's start with the I don't know. That's really common. Really common, right? I don't know. So if you try and do this with somebody, what's going through your mind when you're thinking that? I don't know. My suggestion there, and the thing that tends to get somewhere, is to be able to put on the table that you're noticing. So to be able to say, I'm just noticing that when I ask these questions, often what's coming back is I don't know. And I'm just curious as to what's going on there. So when I ask you that question, what do you think I'm trying to get at? How's that hitting you? Sometimes people are saying I don't know because they don't want to say the wrong thing. It's very common, especially if somebody's already anxious. If you know this person is anxious about making a fool of themselves, that kind of thing. I had one client, I kid you not, who used to be completely silent whenever I spoke to him. The longest silence we had in our second session was 15 minutes. And I broke it. I asked him a question and I broke it. And what was happening when I eventually got through to him, I just said to him, look, I'm just noticing, I ask you a question and then you kind of seem to think for a long time and then nothing comes back. And I'm just curious, what happens? Would you mind sort of trying to explain that to me? And he said that I'd ask him a question and he would then think of an answer, but then immediately his brain would go, no, that's stupid. Don't say that, that's stupid. So then he'd try and find a different answer. And he couldn't find one that didn't look stupid. So we had to kind of agree a negotiation together to sort of say, well, would you be willing to just take a bit of a gamble with me to try and offer me something, even if it might be wrong or even if it might be stupid? And can I really just clarify with you that I'm not looking for a right answer? Because he thought there was a right answer to every question that I asked him. And I said to him, I don't really know. I've no idea. I don't know why you feel anxious. The reason I'm asking is because I'm really curious. I'm really interested. Do you reckon you could take a risk with me and try something out? So sometimes it's because they don't want to say the wrong thing. Sometimes they don't want to say it because it's personal. So just to ask them about what's happening in the room. Like, I'm noticing that you're saying I don't know a lot, and I completely get that. Can I ask you, when I ask you a question, what goes through your head that then comes out with I don't know? Do you think you'd be willing to take a punt with me if you were just taking a guess? Do you think you could try that with me? What do you reckon? So try and negotiate. Therapy and coaching boundaries. Let's do that one. So for me, it's really helpful to look up, to get to know the symptoms of depression, the symptoms of real kind of severe anxiety problems, OCD, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, that kind of thing. And what you'll notice when you look at the symptoms is typically somebody can only really be diagnosed with a mental health problem if it's been going on for about 6 months and if it's really impacting their life. And those are two real things that I think are useful to think about as a coach. So you could easily see somebody saying, well, look, I'm really struggling with anxiety at work about speaking up in meetings. That will look very similar to social anxiety. So some of you might have heard that term, some of you might not. But it only needs therapy, really, if it's getting really in their way. Is it stopping them leaving the house? Is it stopping them speaking to their friends? Is it stopping them going to work? For me, when it's got to that point, that might be an indication that they could do with some therapy. I get anxious about social situations, but you could definitely coach me. One phrase I use quite a lot is don't mistake an emotional reaction to an emotional problem. So somebody getting anxious about things doesn't mean they've necessarily got an anxiety problem. But if you're noticing that what's happening is they can't go to work anymore or they can't see their friends anymore, it's really starting to impact on their life, that's quite a good indication that maybe therapy would be a better place to go. So we don't necessarily do anything majorly different, but what we get as a therapist is we get way more support. We get way more support. So I can turn to my colleagues and I can say, look, I'm working with this person, I'm not sure. I can ring the GP if I'm worried about their safety. As a coach, I can't really do that. I can't ring somebody's GP and say, look, I'm really worried about something because I don't have that connection. But as a therapist, I can.